Hey everyone, welcome to New Slang. I am Thomas Mooney, your host, and you're listening to episode 83, where I talk with songwriter Jesse Daniel. Jesse just released this new record called Rollin On. It's his second record, and falls in line with that old school kind of country revival that's happening right now. It's very much like a honky-tonk homage kind of album, and this is actually one of those podcasts that I originally had slated to do in person back in that first week of March. Jesse was going to be opening up for Culture Wall at a 2-night stand at the Blue Light, and we were originally going to do it back then, and of course, though, all that kind of went out the window during this pandemic, and so we decided to just go ahead and do it on the phone. So Jesse's from rural California, and you can really tell that influence is all over his songwriting and his storytelling style. You hear that Bakersfield Sound. It's super apparent that Jesse is well-versed in the likes of Buck Owens and Merle Haggard and Dwight Yoakam types, and it's also like in his songwriting, his storytelling arcs. There's a lot of songs that have a very John Steinbeckian kind of plight. One of the things I like about Jesse's Rollin On is that he gives space and he allows the space for sharp and warm pedal steel to be the focal point of the song. He allows that to not just be like a background instrument or like a auxiliary kind of piece. It can very much be the sonic focal point. The title track, Rollin On, there's this really California country thing happening on it. You feel like the sharp guitars are just like straight out of the Dwight Yoakam or the Blasters playbook. You know, they're really rocking despite being like a country song. The guitars are hot. It's guitar music even though it's country music at the same time. One thing that I dig about Jesse's sound and songs is that while yes, he is giving us these old school country numbers, they occupy like a very specific feeling, in my opinion. They're highway tunes. They capture that feeling of the fast cars and the open highway, and kind of like that romanticized era of open highway. The songs like Rollin' On, like I just mentioned, and Tar Snakes and Mayo and the Mustard, there's this highway feel, this open roadness to it. Just look at the album art. He's standing there on this open highway near a fence line, and there's these giant mountains in the background, and it's probably on a road that only the locals know. That isn't the only thing, though. It's not just about this stylized version of country music. Jesse's a really great storyteller, too. I mentioned like there's that the Steinbeckian kind of aspects to some of his character arcs. It's these guys who just like have lived in small town California, and that there's this very much a blue collar ethic to them. If you listen to like the song Champion, there's this very Marty Robbins, Merle Haggard kind of feel to it. And of course, like the closing number, Son of the San Lorenzo. I really like the entire premise of that kind of song. It's very much like a self-mythologizing type of song. It's Jesse's song. Charlie Crockett did something similar with The Valley. I just love like that idea of kind of doing it where, you know, all of these songs in some shape or form, there's a part of me in it. But this one specifically is my song. I don't know. I feel like there's just something really cool about that. Before we get started, I want to remind y'all about Monday Night Lights. It's a 50-song compilation of Blue Light songwriters that comes out Friday, May 1st. It's 50 songs by 50 songwriters for $50. All proceeds of Monday Night Lights will be going to the bar staff of Blue Light here in Lubbock. As you know, musicians and bands have had to stomp the brakes on touring and shows. In the live setting, venues have had to temporarily shut down, bars have had to do the same, and that just means that bar staff and venue staff have had to stop working as well, at least in that capacity. So Charlie Stout called me the other day to see if I'd help him with this project where we could raise some money to help out our friends who worked at Blue Light, the unsung heroes, if you will. So Monday Night Lights is essentially named for Songwriter Night at the Blue Light. It's the testing ground of so many songs and really the early stages of so many songwriters who come out of Lubbock. So it felt fitting that me and Charlie called up 50 songwriters who either started out on that Monday night stage who won the songwriter competition and had just those really deep blue light ties. They know how important and essential bar staff is, and I hope you do as well. We did just share the track list. It's a blend of these old school kind of like classic, iconic blue light Lubbock numbers of this era, and then also just like a mix of new songs that haven't seen the light of day yet. I'm really excited for y'all to hear. Everything officially goes live Friday, May 1st on Bandcamp. It's a Bandcamp exclusive, and I'll tell you why. For starters, on Friday, May 1st, Bandcamp is waiving their cut on all sales. So anything you buy on Bandcamp on May 1st, it goes directly to the artist. And that means in our situation, every dollar spent will just go directly to Blue Light staff. We get a bigger cut for it. And another really cool feature on Bandcamp is, let's say you wanted to spend more money than the $50. Let's say you wanted to give $100 or $75 or whatever the case is, $51. You can on Bandcamp. You can pay what you want. Monday Night Lights is not ever going to be going on Spotify or Apple Music or anything like that. So the only way you're going to be able to get it is via Bandcamp. If you go to mondaynightlights.com, everything will be there on Friday. That's where you'll be able to get it, buy it, share it, all that kind of stuff. As always, I will throw a link into the show notes for easy access. And then, of course, as always, go ahead and subscribe to New Slang. Rate us, give us a 5-star on iTunes, share it with all your friends and family. Go like New Slang on Facebook. Give us a follow on Instagram and Twitter at _New Slang. Okay, so that's about it here. Here is Jesse Daniel.
So I guess it's one of those things where I had been trying to get a podcast with you before all of this started, and you were going to be opening up this a couple of shows with Coulter here at the Blue Light here in Lubbock, and then all of a sudden, everything starts getting canceled and getting pushed back and all that stuff, and
Yeah, I
we
know, it's crazy.
finally get to talk here. Yeah, so I guess like what has it been like on your end as far as releasing this record right before, quote unquote, quarantine 2020, and then
Yeah.
having all these dates, and then essentially having to cancel or push back or uh, just have them in limbo for a long time. What's that been like for you as an artist?
Man, yeah, first off, I'm glad to be able to finally do this. That's one, I guess, to start off, that's one of the only real benefits that I could think of to being quarantined and to being healthy, obviously, and able to do stuff like this. But it's kind of allowed me some more time to, yeah, be able to catch up on stuff like this, to do talks and interviews and stuff like that with people. And it's definitely been a crazy time to release a record, uh, for sure. It's been, we had months of touring. We had basically we were out on the road with Jason Boland and the Stragglers,
Mm-hmm.
and we were in Rifle, Colorado, about to play this cool theater called the Oot Theater in Rifle. And we showed up to the venue, got all set up, and then I guess they had called it right then. They said the rest of the dates are canceled, and tonight's canceled as well. So uh, we packed it up and kind of headed back, and we were wondering what was going to happen. And basically everything followed suit after that. All the other artists, and um, essentially I think I had about 3 months worth of dates now, if we're including all the potential stuff in May, and who knows how long. So it's been a lot of lost income for myself and a lot of other artists. But I think having a record to promote at this time has been kind of our only saving grace.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be able to kind of have that to put out there. And I think from a lot of the feedback we've got from people, it seemed to have been kind of a light for them, in this kind of uncertain time.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's been good. That's been kind of definitely keeping the spirits up, is making people happy, and being able to keep ourselves afloat and moving on through this.
Yeah, that's such a something I guess I didn't really even think about is the, you know, things getting canceled while you're not even at home. Because, you know, obviously with whenever things started getting canceled, I was here at the house, you know, and I think like, you know, so
Right.
much of the population was uh, close to home when all this started happening. You know, I don't even, you guys were, you know, in another state, far away, no like real actual plans of being back home at that time. That must have just been, you know, just feeling like you're just kind of caught it, like just lost in the wind or something out in the woods, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, man. It was a little bit devastating, you know, at that at that moment with excuse me, all the dates that we had. This is definitely the busiest year since the beginning of the year. You know, basically we started out the year with Coulter and Mike and the Moon Pies over at Kane's Ballroom,
Mm-hmm.
and we had high hopes. You know, we were that the rest of the year was pretty booked solid, and so yeah, we were definitely pretty upset when, you know, going home and everything, but yeah, just with how serious everything got so fast. I mean, it's kind of been the best we can do. Yeah, is just to stay home and just kind of not contribute to the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
it's weird because yeah, I remember seeing that show that you guys were booked on for that New Year's show, and
right,
you know, at New Year's, I guess it's one of those things you see on social media, and it's been around for forever. It's like, you know, the New Year, new me, and you know, like
yeah,
2020 is gonna be my year, and then like every year, you know, it ends up being like where there's something bad, and people complain about what's been happening through the year, but this is like just another level of of just
yeah.
devastation and just
I remember like I remember the year Merle Haggard died. Everybody was like, "Are you serious?"
mm-hmm.
You know, 2000. Shoot, I want to say it was 16.
Yeah, I believe so. It was
Um,
16, I think. Yeah.
yeah, you know, are you serious? 2016, and then it was something bad happened in 17. You know, it's yeah, exactly. It's like uh, another one of those, except on a whole nother level.
Mm-hmm.
What's crazy is that yeah, we never, um, nobody's in our. I mean, there's been people that are alive now that have been through some crazy stuff, but I think it's safe to say for the most part, nobody's really lived through anything like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does feel there is this this element of it feeling like we're in a big giant social experiment in a way, you know.
Yeah,
I was talking to a buddy about, you know, like this is the part in the movie when you know the UFOs show up to save the day, and like it just doesn't feel like
yeah,
none of that's gonna happen, you know.
right.
um, yeah.
Wouldn't be surprised, man.
Well, so obviously, you know, you released this record, Rolling On, and you know, you said like that's a part of a part of you thinks, you know, like, yeah, I'm glad we have this record out, something we've been working on, um, and it's something that at least we're able to push and promote and during this time. But is there like a part of you that kind of wishes like you would have set back a little bit or been able to push the release date later or anything like that?
You know, right after it happened, right after we basically headed home, we were set to release the record in a couple weeks, few weeks after, and so we were kind of there was a couple days I was going back and forth, and Jody and I were talking about like with our team what the best plan would be, and we ended up deciding to keep the date, and I'm glad we did. Um, and I think I stand by that just because I've seen a lot of people who have been pushing dates back and whatnot, and I think that's definitely smart for some people, but for us, the biggest setback was not being able to tour it. But I think that um, people being home and really kind of looking for something, something to kind of listen to, something to grab onto right now, has kind of worked to the benefit of people releasing music during this time. I don't think obviously it's as good as if we could have been out there hitting the road hard right now. But I think we and our team did like the right thing
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
with that. Went better than I could have hoped for. I was pretty skeptical, with releasing a record in the middle of a pandemic, but
Yeah. Uh, have you? I guess like have you done plenty of the Instagram, Facebook kind of live things to at least you know continue playing somewhat regularly? I'm sure you always kind of have a guitar at hand, anyways. But do you does that kind of give it a little bit of normalcy in a way to at least be able to play these songs live and in quote unquote in front of people?
yeah, definitely. That's been another big one to get used to. The first couple times we've done some live streams just on my own account, and then we've been a lot of companies and publications have been like asking artists to come and do like page takeover style live streams, and like we did one with the Boot, and we're doing one with Boot Barn tonight actually, and they've been cool, man. It's definitely different. It's weird seeing a bunch of comments on a stream or on the screen, and you're just streaming it to these people as opposed to being right there in front of them. So that took some getting used to, but I think that's been um, something that's also really cool, about like the day and age that we live in is we're able to connect, just like you and I are talking right now. We're hundreds of miles away, but we're able to connect, in a way, even in spite of a, virus that's taking hold of the planet.
Yeah. Uh, what's kind of funny is the um, in a live show setting, it's like most of the time you want the audience to not just be screaming and blurting out stuff, and it's probably like the
Right.
exact opposite during this, because you're like, at least say something on Instagram, like if
Yeah.
this is
You're
just
like, man, I missed the heckler.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely, absolutely. It feels kind of the first two times that I did a live stream, it felt very, when you hit the little last tag of the song, the little
Mm-hmm.
you expect the clapping or people to do something, it's just silent.
Yeah.
It's kind of a little bit of a weird thing, but um, yeah, it's been pretty cool though. All in all, I'm glad we're able to do that.
Yeah. um Obviously we've been talking about all this, but like this is all revolving around you having the record. um I guess it was like last year you started really um unfolding the layout of like, hey, I'm going to be releasing a record, yada yada, all that kind of stuff. um
Mm.
like what was like your game plan going into to recording Rollin On, and just getting all those songs collected and ready? What was kind of like that, I guess, getting all your T's crossed and I's dotted as far as like what you wanted as an idea for what this record was going to be?
Right. I'd say, we had a pretty clear vision. Um, in 2018, I released my self-titled record, and that was, by comparison, that record was a lot more. There were songs that I'd written over a long period of time. That was kind of my first introduction to really, cutting a full studio record like by myself and doing that. And this one, as far as the songs go, it was a shorter amount of time, but I'd say probably a more inspired amount of time. When writing these songs, like there's a lot of inspiration and a lot of kind of desire to get them out to people. And when we basically decided to go with, found out about Tommy Dedamore, who we did the record with, through just listening to there's a Jim Lauderdale record, This Changes Everything. I really love the production on that. And that last Doug Somm record also that Tommy worked on, among a bunch of others. I had this batch of songs basically, and I started kind of toying with the idea that I wanted to get somebody to co-produce it with me. And after kind of going down the rabbit hole on Tommy, I basically just shot him a cold email and pitched the whole thing to him, and he was into it. So that kind of set everything in motion. And from there, yeah, we launched that Kickstarter campaign to basically just as like a pre-order for the record, and that went really well. Ended up getting the whole record funded. And studio wise, it was pretty incredible, like just how quickly everything rolled and how the band that played on the record was really able to just capture exactly what I had kind of envisioned for each song. So it was definitely the most fun I've ever had making a record.
Yeah, you mentioned that your first self-titled record there, and then I guess like the that's interesting. You say like the excitement of wanting to get these songs out. I guess like I've not really ever thought about the um the momentum aspect of having I guess like the being a little unsure the first time you put a record out. Are these songs, is it going to sell? Are people going to buy it? And then once
Right.
once you do get a little bit of some buzz, if you will, you're
Mm-hmm.
I guess it does add to the entire excitement of getting these songs out. And if there's one thing on these songs, there's a little bit of like that, um, pressing forward. I mean, like Rolling On, for example, is just like that right example of just moving forward, and moving up, and
Right.
a little bit more of an optimistic kind of a sound and everything, even.
Yeah, definitely, man. This record had a lot of that forward momentum and kind of a little bit more of a positive message and spin, and that's kind of where I'm at, or at least it's where I'm at, and especially where I was, at the time with writing those. Like, I'm glad that we were able to kind of musically capture those. The band, they ended up giving a lot of energy to the songs, and that's really what I had in mind for them. And I think that if it would have been a little bit more stripped down, it would have lost that. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Like these songs are very much, the big kind of 50s country, 60s kind of Bakersfield sound. I mean, you mentioned Merle a minute back. Like that California kind of just that golden era of country. It's very
oh
much
yeah,
in that same vein.
yeah, I love all that stuff, man. That was another huge influence, that I told these guys. They were all kind of joking around with me when we went out to cut it with Tommy, that I had to come all the way to Floresville, Texas, to cut a Bakersfield record. And it's cool because they all were, they're huge fans of Buck Owens, and I feel like there is a lot of, since guys like Merle Haggard and Buck Owens were doing their thing back in 50s and 60s. Uh, they really made such an impression that you can hear, for instance, like Don Rich's all of his signature guitar licks. You can hear those on records from like the 70s, 80s, especially the 90s. There's a ton of 90s country that really kind of emulated that. And so that made such a big kind of impact on me in the way that I play. I really wanted to represent my home state and that that form of country that I love so much.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Jim Lauderdale. I guess it was like probably like 8 years ago. I saw this show
Mm-hmm.
during South by that it was like the bill. It was one of those bills where it was just completely stacked. Where um, it was him and Buddy Miller playing together, and
Mm-hmm.
I think like if I remember the the lineup, it was I know Steve Earle played a set, and um,
Nice.
God, I'm blanking on who
Love
else was
Steve Earle.
there. But like I walked away with like Buddy Miller and Jim Lauderdale as just kind of being like the best show I have seen like that weekend kind of thing. It was just so, and I remember they opened that show, that
Oh
lineup,
wow.
and it was just like just the chemistry between those two guys, but then also just the sound was just so spectacular.
That's awesome. Yeah, I haven't gotten to see him live, but just the songs that he's written and his voice is pretty incredible. You can do so much with it.
Mhm.
And just the production on a lot of his records I really like.
Yeah, there's a lot of, and it's the same thing with Buddy too. There's a lot of just dynamic stuff happening. It's very, um, like I hate to say it's like very meat and potatoes, but in a way, like what they do is there's not like all this. It's very organic. You know what I mean? There's not a whole lot of just
Right.
extra unnecessary stuff. But what they're doing is the stuff that they do have is just like right there up front and just really good. And I think like you know, we talk about like 90s country. When people talk about 90s country, you think of like George Strait and Garth Brooks,
Hmm.
but like there's that underlying that I don't know, whatever the next level of guys is that
Right.
just
Right.
had so much of a big impact on the sound too.
Definitely, man. Yeah, I feel like if we're talking about the same thing, I feel like some of those guys like Rodney Crowell,
Mhm.
um, he to me was always kind of more of like a songwriter, and then I hadn't really been introduced to a whole lot of his like 90s stuff other than like the Couldn't Leave You If I Tried. Like I knew that song.
Yeah.
But you listen to the production, that really was like that quintessential 90s country sound. But yeah, I feel like they were like the next level from the Alan Jacksons or the.
This episode is sponsored by Smith Iron and Design. It's owned and operated by one of my good friends, Aaron Smith, and his dad, Sonny. As the name implies, Smith Iron and Design specializes in creating custom metal and woodwork. They have a vast array of metal signs that are perfect wall decor that'll tie a room together. They design everything from welcome signs to family crests, flags, and Texas cutouts. They have a series of these metal wreaths that are perfect for your front door, and you are able to change them out depending on the season. Are you a sports fan? Well, there's nothing better than having a giant logo of your team on the wall of your den or office. When it comes to signage, the possibilities are really endless. What you should really do though is head over to smithironanddesign.com to get a look at their vast portfolio. That's smithironanddesign.com. I'll throw a link into the show notes as well. They don't just do signs either. Some of the smaller items are custom bottle openers and keychains. Then they also have bookshelves, TV stands, nightstands, and fire pits. It was about a year ago, Aaron built me a custom shelf. I needed something new to store some of my vinyl and everything I had come across. Either the shelves weren't big enough for LPs, or it looked too bland or cheaply made, or to be perfectly honest, too expensive. So I wound up talking with Aaron, and about a week later, I was able to pick up this custom shelf unit that's just been amazing. It's incredibly sturdy, has a bit of a rustic feel. In my opinion, one of the best parts was just having so much control in the process. You can get them as tall as you want with the shelves at the perfect depth and length. Again, for me, this was for storing vinyl, so they had to be a certain height and depth. I've been thinking about getting a custom bookshelf companion piece soon as well. Now, for the most part, they primarily serve the Lubbock area and the South Plains, but for some of their smaller pieces, they're able to ship nationwide as well. Again, smithironanddesign.com. Now back to the show.
The that obviously like there's the aspect of the how like where country's gone to in the last decade or so, just like kind of like
Mm.
just that homogenized sound of country and pop and hip hop and rock and roll are all like the same thing, but um
Yeah, yeah.
there is that revival. I was wanting to ask you about. There is guys like you and the Moon Pies and Coulter, and there's a lot of these guys that are coming around right now. I mean, like Jamie Wyatt, like a lot of
Hmm.
what I guess what you would call like a revival of an older style of country. Um, do you think that like it's happening because it's just like the ebb and flow of country music as far as like what's quote unquote popular and geared towards the masses, or do you think like there's I guess like what is your opinions on the I guess the revival of a quote unquote classic kind of country style?
Right. I think, yeah, it's interesting. I think that there's definitely, there's a lot of, people that have, and I used to kind of think more so like this, that have this kind of, like like a very adamant, like hate for anything that's not like classic country.
Mm-hmm.
And, I definitely used to be a little more like stuck up and whatnot. And I've tried to really kind of open my mind to possibilities of things kind of growing in different directions and people, doing what they want to do and making what they want to make. And I respect that. But on the other hand, it makes me really, proud and happy to be a part of the kind of, like you said, the kind of revival that I feel like is going on right now. I think like all those artists you mentioned, um, there's a cool thing happening right now. And I remember I was talking with, Coulter at this last show we did, or I did with him at, Orpheum Theater in Flagstaff. And I was telling him that I thought it's funny because I was telling him I was like, man, I got a great feeling about 2020. It's gonna be a great year. He was like, yeah, you think so? I was like, yeah, man, I think it's gonna be the best year, for this type of music, for country music and just kind of authentic stuff. And we were kind of talking about that, but in spite of everything that's going on, I think that there is, like you said, kind of a cool new interest in that. And I think that there's a lot of younger people who are kind of perking up to the idea of it being cool and interesting to not just follow along with, like, the trends and whatnot, what's on the radio,
Mm-hmm.
um, which, yeah, if that becomes cool, who knows? Eventually, maybe that'll be the mainstream. You never can tell, but um, I think it's cool that there's interest in it for sure, man. I'm glad, honored to be a part of it.
Yeah, it is one of those things where, um, I also I feel like I was, real pretentious when it came to this is what country music is and this is what it's not and what you guys are doing is
Right.
not country. Yeah, that whole kind of thing. But that kind of gets tiring. You know what I mean? Like you realize like
Totally.
man, like that is exhausting being that guy. Like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I guess like one of my deals is just that, you know, it sometimes it goes too far in that direction and it pushes out all of the other the diversity in country music because like there is a lot of other you know I guess movements in country that sometimes gets those fires get stomped out if everything's a is just bro country or you know what I mean like and
Right.
uh
Right.
if there's anything that needs to have like a revival it is like this kind of country. um
Absolutely, man. I agree.
you mentioned just talking with Coulter. Like, how much do you guys? It's not necessarily even Coulter, but like, how much do you guys um, feed off one another? Is there like even a an aspect of being influenced by contemporaries
I'm not sure. I mean, do you mean like me and Coulter, or just kind of peers in general?
and peers in general?
Yeah, I'd say like definitely, like for me on like the inspiration factor. One of the guys for me that was always a big inspiration in like the hustle area. Like I always really appreciated his hustle and his drive was Charlie Crockett.
Mm-hmm.
He's just always always out. I mean, ever since I met him, it was a few years ago now, and then he took me out on tour, opening up some runs of shows, and him and his whole crew just were, yeah, very driven, and also like pretty positive and nice and kind to people, and took time to like talk to fans and stuff, and that made a big impression on me, and kind of if there's any doubt in my mind of like how to do things a certain way, like getting to see guys like that I looked up to doing it like that, that's, I think that's such a cool thing to be able to like teach generations that way, just by leading by example. Excuse me. And so yeah, definitely, I think, for me in that way, just by kind of seeing the way people are doing things and respecting their hustle,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
musically also, I love uh, so much of my peers' music, that they're putting out. It's cool to listen to.
Yeah.
But I think that the cool thing is to be able to all, we obviously are kind of drawing from a similar well of like a love from that traditional country music. And it's interesting to see everybody's interpretation of it,
Absolutely. Yeah.
super inspiring.
It's also interesting because the just thinking about like of previous generations of country or just music in general, so much of your peers are um far away, and there's no real way to get a hold of them unless you're on the road together, or that's why like everyone kind of moved to Nashville or Austin or
Right.
wherever. But now like you're able to keep up and keep tabs on everyone via social media. It's easier to
Right.
see more of the insight in people's lives, and like just even you know uh just messaging them or like commenting. There's a lot more ways to interact with your favorite artist, but artists with other artists. Like there's just so much more interaction. And I think that definitely has had an impact on you know the way music sounds. You know what I mean? It's also interesting that how you were talking about the um, the interpretations, the various interpretations of everyone's favorite old music.
Right.
Going
Yeah.
back. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, exactly, man. You hit it. It is super cool to see.
What I was gonna say was like going back to the songs of Rollin On. Um,
Mm.
Obviously, you kind of mentioned a little bit before of like how the first record, all those songs were from like a bigger piece of time. These songs, like right here, what's the oldest song on here? What's the song that is probably like the oldest of this bunch?
I'd say the oldest of the bunch is Only Money Honey. That one is a duet I do with Jody, and we actually wrote that one. I think that's the only one on the record that's like a few years or more, almost like 3.5, 4 years old. Uh, we wrote that one when we first got to Jody's. By the way, she's my partner, and she also manages the group and kind of helps co-run Die True Records. It's our label we started, and we basically just kind of run the whole ship together, and we write a lot also together. So she and I wrote that one, and it was during, yeah, basically just a time when we had a lot of overhead and a lot of crazy odds stacked against us, and we were feeling pretty underwater as far as just life goes in general, and money and whatnot. So that song was really kind of born out of that desperate time. We actually wrote it in the dark when our power was out. We lived way up in the mountains. When we lived in California, we lived way up, and a tree had fallen and blocked basically our way into town, and also cut the whole power to the whole area. So we were just in the dark for about a week, hanging out up there,
Yeah,
and ended up writing that song.
yeah. That's for people here in Texas. I mean, that sounds like real trees to me. Like, you know,
Yeah, huge redwoods, man.
yeah.
They're massive.
It's one of those things where like I grew up here in West Texas, and like there's no way in hell like
Yeah,
a tree would be able to block your way anywhere.
right. Yeah,
But
man. I
um,
know. I used to, when I was young. growing up in the mountains, like where I did, I always felt so kind of claustrophobic, stuck by the trees. You're always kind of under this canopy, it
Mm-hmm.
feels like. And whenever I drive through, the desert, or when I got to go to Texas a couple times, like I loved driving into West Texas, or like, Arizona, New Mexico. I loved wide open spaces. So
Yeah.
that was something I felt like I never really got growing up.
Yeah. I've always love that aspect too. Like there is this. I was trying to tell. I was somebody didn't really kind of. I feel like they were skeptical of what I was saying, but I was like, yeah, I
Mm.
just there is this aspect of being a little bit claustrophobic in other areas because it just feels um like everything just kind of just too much stuff around, you know.
Yeah, like if you were to live in, New York City or some place like that. I have so many friends who live there, and my hat's off to them, because we did one of the shows I did with Jason Boland and the Stragglers. Played at this place in Manhattan, and just trying to find parking took me about 2.5 hours,
Yeah.
and it was
Ooh.
pretty wild feeling. So it's crazy. This country has a lot of different landscapes.
Yeah. I want to get back to old only money honey, but I want to ask you first because you're talking
Hmm.
about New York. When you have to when you're touring around places that are like these big urban sprawls or like metro areas, how much more planning has to go into just finding parking and stuff like that? How much is there more I guess like planning aspects of your trip?
Yeah, definitely. I think that was something that I didn't ever really. Uh, I didn't grow up. I grew up in a really small area, and we'd go into the city. The closest big city to us was San Francisco, so we'd go north to San Francisco every now and again. And that, so when I had an idea, but I never really knew what it was like to be touring and trying to park a van, or bigger in a place like that. But yeah, definitely adds a layer of complexity. My my driving rage has gotten a lot better than it used to be. So I've usually, when we get into the city, I just have to take some deep breaths and wait till we find that parking.
Yeah, yeah. Going back to the song, how much has the song changed from that like original first version, that first draft that you guys were kind of working out? Did has it changed a whole lot or morphed into something else?
We yeah, we always wanted it to be kind of a walking shuffle, uh, just a real classic country kind of walking shuffle. But it definitely evolved once we got it in the studio with the band, and we worked it out and ended up, kind of arranging all the harmonies with fiddle and steel and everything else. And that, it really came to life when we did that. And it was kind of one of those songs that we didn't play all that much live at all until we recorded it with the band, and then we ended up adding it to our catalog and played. Now we've been playing it for a while, but it kind of took getting it down with the band before we could really bring it in.
Yeah, kind of found its way. Um,
Exactly, it kind of came into its own.
yeah. How much do you on this record did you feel like um, were songs where you had a specific idea and you wanted it that way, or was it more of a let's kind of like be a little bit loose and see what the song uh, what happens in the studio? What kind of approach did you guys take?
I'm definitely kind of a control freak when it comes to my sound and everything, and how I wanted it to sound. And Tommy, he was joking around. He was like, I didn't know that we were co-producing this thing when we first started. He was like, just joking that I kind of took the reins and whatnot, but we ended up working really well together. And if there was something he was adamant about, like if he didn't hear something there, or he wanted some level different, he'd really put his foot down and be like, no, I really think that this is the way I think it would sound best. Let's just try it, and we do that. But for the most part, it was great because I was kind of able to. I had a pretty precise vision of like what I wanted, and they were all great at being able to just knock that out.
Yeah. The did you ever watch that Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre documentary? Like it was on HBO a couple years back. I can't remember
No,
the
I
name
don't
of
think
it.
so.
The reason I bring it up is just simply because like Jimmy, he started out like as a engineer, and he worked on all these like really cool records, but he talked about like how frustrating it was working with Bruce Springsteen. And I guess it was on the record Darkness on the Edge of Town. And he was this engineer on this record, and like Bruce apparently just being really, really difficult in the recording process of like, hey, let's try this out. No, that doesn't work. Let's try this. And like just on like mic placement kind of stuff, that kind of thing. And
oh no.
And I guess like the producer took Jimmy to the side one time and was just like, hey, if you just do everything he says, and you're gonna find a friend for life kind of deal. And
right.
There's this quote that just like really I just have always remembered, and it was from Bruce, and he was like, me as the artist being in the studio, like this is a time for you to indulge me. And so I expect everyone to indulge any idea that I have, or like, just to find the right thing. And
right.
I think there is probably like, that's probably like a little too far, but
I mean, yeah, you could argue that that's maybe a little on the pompous side, but I think that's awesome at the same time. Like, I think that's true. And that's where like that's kind of what I meant by like Tommy. Yeah, as far as like mic placement and all that, like the stuff that he truly knows, I don't know anything about that, but he basically took care of everything like that, and then facilitated everything else for me. Kind of let me, have that creative control to be able to really kind of play around with different ideas I had. That's funny though, man. That's a cool quote.
Yeah, it's I can't remember the documentary. I think it was called The Defiant Ones. It was like
okay. I got to check that out.
A couple of episodes about their partnership, and like I guess like the way they came up in the music business, and but like it's really interesting. I think like my favorite part of that documentary was how, in a lot of ways, this is just like worshiping Jimmy and Dr. Dre for being geniuses. You know what I mean? And so like all these artists who they've worked with over the years are just kind of like giving them their dues and praise. And the only one who really ever had any pushback in the interviews was Tom Petty. He was just kind of like,
really,
you could just hear the eye roll in everything he said. But it was so funny. But he, it's Tom Petty.
That's hilarious.
But
this episode is sponsored by Wicker's Mesquite Smoked Jalapeno Jelly. It's owned and operated by my buddy Wes Wicker, who makes the jelly in small batches for the best quality and freshness. He smokes the peppers with mesquite and uses pure cane sugar to make the jelly. What you get is this great blend of smoky, sweet, and spicy. It's addictively savory. For those uninitiated, Wicker's is a great addition to any chef's kitchen. Part of what makes Wicker's so great is just how versatile it really is. For starters, it makes a great meat glaze. Throw it on a batch of hot wings, use it on some pork ribs, some pork chops, really whatever you can think of. Eat it on biscuits, cornbread, bagels, or toast. Throw it on a ham or turkey sandwich. Another super simple but effective way is to get some cream cheese, throw some Wickers on top, and then grab your favorite cracker. Wickers is currently stocked at a handful of places in Lubbock and on the South Plains, as well as some Fort Worth and DFW locations. But the easiest way to get your hands on a jar is to head over to wickerstx.com. That's WICKERSTX.com. I'll throw a link into the show notes for good measure. They currently come in two varieties, original and now hot, if you need just a little bit more kick in your bite. You can order anything from 1 jar to a case of 12, whatever fits your needs. Again, that's wickerstx.com. Okay, back to the show.
These songs, when it comes to like songwriting for you, are you a somebody who needs like the, I guess, like being at home in that space, or are you able to, pick it up and take songwriting on the road and kind of write on the road and write in various places? What's kind of your style?
Um, I've definitely written on the road before, but I think it's more comfortable for me to be at home. I usually find that when I get back from being on the road, or I have kind of a moment to decompress, then I'm able to. That's when I usually feel most inspired to start writing, and it usually just happens from picking up the guitar and playing around, or and having a pen and paper handy. Um, but yeah, being on the it's hard. I've always wanted to be that guy who comes off the road with a new record or whatever, but it's I think because of all of that Jody and I are basically doing with running the whole show and making sure we're like getting orders shipped from the road and like doing kind of all these different things, driving.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little hard to feel creative in between all that stuff and the actual shows themselves.
Yeah.
That's something I definitely want to, get better at, is being able to find that space and kind of do that while on the road. But for now, yeah, just writing at home has been cool. I love now it's we have all the time in the world. I've had the most time at home that I've had in quite a while,
Yeah.
and I've ended up writing a whole lot more. I've got just about another record's worth of songs
Mm-hmm.
that we're going to be hopefully getting into the studio sometime later this year with.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting too. I mean, like, there's nothing quite like getting a record right out of a pandemic.
Yeah, the pandemic sessions, baby.
um, yeah, it is weird having like, I think in uh in theory it sounds great riding on the road, but then like you just realize just how little time there is. It's just like smaller pockets of time to to actually do it,
Exactly.
and if you're not like if you're not you know Springsteen just because offhand, like who's got like you know every there's everyone's doing all the other jobs, you
He
know
just has to sleep and drink water like
yeah, yeah.
and show up.
I'm sure like there's plenty of time for him to ride on the road, but when you're
Right.
having to drive the van, find that parking in New York City, and ship records
Yeah,
out and all that kind of stuff, it just takes time.
absolutely, man. It does. But that's something that it's an aspiration of mine for sure. One day I want to be riding on that bus, laying in my bunk and being able to just write for hours and hours. That'll be awesome.
Yeah, you mentioned pen and pad. Are you like do you like to write in pen, or are you kind of a mix of technology and old school like actual notebook style?
Yeah, usually I have a few notebooks going that I usually do, just like a composition book or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually write just out of those, and we'll write down ideas. But if I don't have anything like that, I have my notes on my phone that I'll also fill up. And the only problem with the phone, I feel like, is you have to go back so far. I have so many in there, but for whatever reason, it's almost easier for me on a piece of paper to like flip to this page or that page. But I do both, definitely.
Yeah, like
I have probably like 500. Sometimes I'll be driving and I'll get some inspiration and I'll just hit record. So I have hundreds of weird, out of context sayings and things like that.
yeah, the it is a luxury to have like that uh technology right there at hand to be like hit record, here's this idea. But I can imagine like
Absolutely.
how easy it is where all of a sudden you do have just like you're overwhelmed with notes when you try and look back through.
Yeah, exactly, man. I think I prefer the writing method, but yeah, pretty lucky to have phones and that technology. It helps.
Mm-hmm. Are like what's kind of like your when you think like, oh yeah, I need to record that saying or like write it down in a even like the notes app or something like that. Is there like, do you ever just hear people say something or anything like that and you're like, that's a potential something or another?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. That was when Jody and I first got together. Her dad passed away before we were together, so I never got to know him. But her and all of her family, like he was a really funny guy and had a saying for everything. And one of the sayings that he would always, you know, say to Jody basically when she would be driving around as like kind of a rebellious teenager, he'd tell her to keep it between the mayo and the mustard. If she was, driving it, like, all right, well, make sure you keep it between the mayo and the mustard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I always thought that that was really cool. And I think that was one of those moments where I was like, hey, what'd you say? And I had to kind of go back and make sure I got that one down.
Yeah. The
But yeah, I definitely do that.
yeah. I was gonna ask too. Like you just said, you've been writing. Is how many like songs do you typically try and push for? Is there like a magic number for you as far as like I want to go in with X amount of songs, knowing that I'll cut down to 12 or something like that? Is there anything like that, or is it just kind of just just playing it by ear, I guess?
Yeah, this with Rolling On, we went in and had, I think in the demoing process, we had some demos that I did beforehand, and we ended up cutting, I think, one or two off of that. Um, but when we went in to actually cut the record, we had a really clear idea of like how many songs. It was 12 songs, and I kind of like to do that a little more because I think it, I don't know, it almost feels more secure, like you know exactly what you're doing, and that
Mm-hmm.
way you're not putting time or effort into something that might not get used. Or there's also the kind of fear that if you record it with this batch of songs, it might not fit into the next record because of the sonic difference or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So I've always kind of strayed away from doing that, but that is something I've been interested in, and I think it's definitely cost effective to go in and cut 50, if you're in the studio already, go ahead and cut a couple extra songs on the off chance that you'll use them.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned growing up in rural California, in a little bit of a small town. Kind of like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's kind of I I think a lot of people think of like California as being like big city and like that's it, but there are these like you know big areas of just where it's just rural small town stuff. I guess like
Yeah.
like how much did growing up in California have like an impact on not just the sonic qualities, but like your storytelling aspects of telling stories.
Right. Definitely plays a huge part. There's, yeah, California is, a lot of people don't realize how huge it is. I mean, it's 800 plus miles of coastline, that basically goes all the way to Nevada, and all in between, from top to bottom of the state. There's tons of farming, agriculture,
Mm-hmm.
hunting, fishing. Like there's much more rural space than there is city. But we have a couple of like the hugest cities. There's Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego's really big.
Right.
But other than that, I mean, there's some sizable smaller cities and towns and stuff. But there's much more rural area than people think of. And like that, my album cover, is this really beautiful spot out in this near this ranch in Hollister, California. That's just some of the most beautiful country that you'll ever see. But that being said, that really, yeah, the landscape, it's really wild in a lot of places and pretty untouched if you go far out. And that always was really inspiring to me, just to be able to kind of access that. Where I grew up, we lived right behind this creek and right down from the river, and I would always play in that as a kid. That's kind of where, Son of the San Lorenzo came from.
Mm-hmm.
And it's played a big part. I mean, other than the, obvious like Bakersfield Sound influence, I love that stuff. But yeah, definitely growing up in California has made me who I am, and who I think, somewhat of the songwriter that I am.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, you're down in Austin now, and obviously you're on the road so much. But how much do you get back to California and try and visit? You still have, I'm assuming, a lot of family out there.
Yeah. All my family is basically in the Santa Cruz area. They, we moved out here about a little over 6 months ago, and haven't been back there yet. We planned, we were supposed to be in Santa Cruz, I think, last weekend playing. We had that whole month solid West Coast tour, and we were going to try to see some family and everything. So it's been kind of turned upside down with what's going on. But I definitely, it's been really cool. I love Texas a lot, and that's when we cut the record with Tommy. I kind of really fell in love with this area and the people and everybody that we met, and definitely knew it was the right move for us. But I'd be lying if I said I don't get homesick sometimes. I definitely love my family and California in general. So
mm-hmm.
Definitely want to get back there as soon as I can to see everybody.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if we ever get out of quarantine 2020.
Yeah.
But
They'll be listening in like 200 years to this archived. Somehow they found this podcast. Be like, oh, those poor souls.
All right, thanks for listening once again. Be sure to check out Rollin On by Jesse Daniel. Check out episode sponsors Smith Iron and Design and Wicker's Mesquite Smoked Jalapeno Jelly. Okay, we will see y'all next week.